if one was to go to the island of Philae, they would run across this amazing building. It's only one of the amazing things that are found in Philae, because of course Philae was written about by several other scholars in their time. One of the things that they said was that it was used by both Nubians and Egyptians. And even during the time of the Greeks and the Romans in Egypt, this temple was built at the time of the Greeks and the Romans. Even during that time, the Nubians came over for festivals. Now, I could tell you in my own way what that means, but I think it's better if I just read it off of Wikipedia because they've got the accurate information. I don't usually read off of Wikipedia unless they have accurate information. I can confirm it from elsewhere. Before I start reading, let me first say a couple facts. The ancient Egyptian religion, though it died a long time ago, it was actually maintained by the Nubians until a certain date, and I'll reveal that date later because its collapse comes together with a certain rise of another religion. This was not a coincidence. This was a direct challenge. And also, it gives rise to a lot of certain scholars of that religion in Egypt taking interest in ancient Egyptian because that religion was not dead yet in those regions. But you'll see what I mean. So as we read here, I'm not going to be able to pronounce this, but Takara de Meni was a king of Kush who was ruling in AD 253. His reign may be dated from 245 to 246 to sometime after 265 266. Now remember, this is AD. This is 300 years before Islam. His throne name, attested in Egyptian hieroglyphics, was Hippur Ka Ra, meaning Ra is one whose Ka came into being, rendered in Meroitic. The Meroitic language has to do with the Sudanese. Now remember, every tradition that existed in ancient Egypt, as you can see with that picture of his, every tradition of ancient Egypt was being utilized or used in the Sudanese regions at this time. And you will see this, that this is the same Nubians that I was talking about, where the Romans say the Nubians start on the west side of North Egypt, so Upper Egypt, all the way down to Meroe. But at this time, that it expanded, so it was even beyond Meroe. So we read Tuckered Demenis reign is attested in dedicatory inscriptions on three statue bases from the Epidemic Temple M6 in Meroe. Epidemic is the main god that is only seen in Nubia. Later is seen in Egypt, but in earlier times it was a pure Nubian god. The most important monument of Tekeredimul, however, is an inscription bearing his name in Demotic Egyptian in the temple of Isis at Philae. Now, I want you to remember what I just said. The island that I was showing you that is in Egypt today and is was under the occupation of the Romans. This is what they say. The most important monument of Tekara Demeni, however, is an inscription bearing his name in Demotic Egyptian, which means the people who wrote his name down understood the ancient Egyptian language, and they understood it they understood how to write, and they understood it to the degree where they wrote it in this specialized way in the temple of Isis at Philae. Let me first explain something, because I mentioned that the Nubians kept the religion alive till way later in Nubia, and of course in Egypt. They kept the religion alive. It's actually a shame that it died so late, and we are not able to capture its true spirit, which I think if we keep reading Meroitic texts, we're going to start to piece together what it really meant to the ancient Egyptians. But see, in places like Europe, where they took some of the religions, for example, Isis, there's a temple of Isis in, I think, Rome or Greece, but the Romans and the Greeks took favor, or they took a liking to Isis, and there were cults formed in the name of Isis called the cult of Isis. The difference between that and the Sudanese, the Nubians, is that they took the whole religion. They didn't take it, it was their religion to begin with, but they had the entire religion from top to bottom, to the point that they were respected in Egypt for holding the native religion. Think about it. These people were chased out of Egypt by the Assyrians at one point, and then there was a back and forth fight, and then there was foreign occupation until the day that guy is still in charge, is still under foreign occupation. But let's read the next part that shows that they're still respected as the original Egyptians. So let's read. The inscriptions is dated 10 April 253 during Tukaradimeni's second regional year and during the reign of the Roman Emperor Trebinius Gallus. The inscription was commissioned by a Kushite official named Pasan, which is another person that we're going to look into another day, who in Tekeredameni's first and second years was his official representative at the Choke Festival of Isis in Philae. We'll get back to that. In 253, he was accompanied by Abrote Paseto of Lower Nubia. In 260, Abrate and the Corn Mejeratami reached an agreement with the Egyptian priests that recognized the Kushite king's authority over the temple. Let's read that again. In 260, Abrate and the Corn Mejeratami reached an agreement with the Egyptian priests that recognized the Kushite king's authority over the temple. This means that the Nubians who are found in Philae, and again, I'll stress that there are several people, Greco-Romans, who talked about how this island was occupied almost always by Nubians and Egyptians alike, and that their traditions were pretty much the same. The only way you could tell the difference was how they were dressed, and they shared certain continuous religious things. Another inscription at Philae is dated to the 20th regional year of an unnamed Kushite king. There are several reasons to date the inscription to about 265 to 266. Ing Hoffman assigns it to Tekeredameni. Possible. Now, if we go back to that one that I was talking about, the inscriptions was commissioned by a Kushite official named Pasan. This tells you how the Nubians were engaging with both the Romans and the native Egyptians at the time. That some of their officials, some of their people who came from Nubia, because they were recognized as both true Egyptians and they were recognized as true holders of the mythologies of Egypt, they were, what's the word I'm looking for? Let's use a chess title. They were castled. They were put to the top, crowned as being able to be in charge of certain rites and ceremonies religiously to even native Egyptians. And of course, they use that status to then bless their Meroitic kings who were stationed far away. In a way, you can look at Egypt like it was the Mecca for other people who were Egyptians. So Libyans and Nubians and native Egyptians would look at Egypt like it's Mecca. Although, Egyptians in the past did sort of look at Sudan or Nubia like it was the real Mecca. Like they would make let's call it pilgrimages all the way down to Nubia. Now, of course, names of kings, names of priests, names of different people who speak different languages, that's the important part. Remember, Meroitic is a Nilo-Saharan language, and the ancient Egyptians spoke a Afroasiatic language. So there must have been a lingua franca. The lingua franca was a European language. It was actually Greek. But so what is it that was preserved? Well, so with the rise of Islam, Christianity became way more aggressive, even in foreign lands. And this is probably why the ancient Egyptians that were secure for many, many years. I mean, the ancient Egyptian religion is thought to have been slowly declining until the 600 AD, where it just dropped and just disappeared. And the reason it disappeared, of course, was because the war stopped being Christianity and paganism and it became Christianity and Islam. When Islam decided that paganism was not a good thing and should not be even tolerated a little bit, you can tell. I mean, if you look at some of the Roman periods and all of that, that there's some other cults that exist in the area. You can tell that at some point they went crazy destroying. And I'm not just talking about the Romans, I'm talking about the Ethiopians, I'm talking about some of the people in Yemen, some of these other people. They tried to strengthen their branches by getting rid of paganism. So when Islam was growing, you need to make sure you can stop it. And the pagans, a lot of them, they're very happy to join with the Christians because they needed something to push back while they hold their pagan religion in their pocket, which would come out later in the form of Muslim scholars that were black located in Egypt. This would call for a Nubian man, which I can bring up. He was, remember, I always show like pictures of certain scholars who, even though they were Muslim, they're looked at as very high Muslims, very top Muslims. They kept the secrets of ancient Egypt and the religion was added into Islam. Of course, the person I'm talking about is the Nubian Zulnun al-Misri. Zulnun al-Misri was, of course, and I've mentioned this many times, he was a Sufi. He added a bunch of stuff that used to be in ancient Egyptian religion into the Muslim tradition, and he sort of forced them through claiming that the ancient ways had something to do with the new ways, that the old stories are related. They were just practicing it wrong in some way. So his interest obviously led him to this. Now, something that makes it painfully obvious that he cared a lot about ancient Egypt was his love for alchemy, his belief that the secrets of magic lay not in the hands of, his fellow Muslims, but instead it lay in the secrets known by the alchemists. Now, it's not a surprise that he believed this, right? Like Zulnun al-Mizri believed this because if you go and check, 90% of people at the time, like the Greeks, the Romans, everybody, they believed that ancient Egyptians were magicians. They just believed this. Even in biblical texts, when they talk about Egyptians, they talk about them being able to do magic. And you get later Jewish texts which claim that Jesus was just a Egyptian that could do magic, but we'll come back to that. What they say here, and you will see that some of them are biased to say, but the Egyptian magicians did the same thing by their secret arts, and the Pharaoh's heart became hard. He would not listen to Moses and Aaron, just as the Lord had said. So this is the story of Moses, obviously, and in this story, Moses does a something where he turns a stick into a snake, and the Egyptians do the exact same thing. The assumption here is that they can just do it. It's not a trick as some of them write. It's not anything like that. It's that he can actually do it. They can actually do it. And so because the ancient Egyptians did it, the Pharaoh's heart is hardened, and the Pharaoh continues to believe in his own people. What a horrible story. But in real life, if we go and check other people, we will find quote after quote. So I took us on that journey to say this. Zulnun al-Misri was a Muslim, but he was a Muslim only by name. In real life, he was a ancient Egyptian scholar who was disguising himself. I mean, the fact that we have books of him trying to retranslate the ancient texts, but we know that he spoke a Nubian language. We're not sure which one he spoke, but if he spoke the Meroitic language, by the way, he's Egyptian. He's a Nubian from Egypt, meaning he was born in Egypt. His family was probably always in Egypt, but he's one of those who are in Egypt and not Meroe. But if he spoke Meroitic, that means he could understand some of the things written on the wall. And it's possible that some of his translations were deliberately inaccurate, that he didn't want to reveal that he could translate a lot of the things that were written on the walls, because some of them were written in Meroitic and he could read that easily. Now, obviously, Zulnun al Misri wasn't just a scholar of the Nubian texts and of the ancient Egyptian texts, because, of course, there's the lingua franca, Greek. And because Greek was the language that everybody else spoke, he also delved into ancient Greek philosophy and Greek philosophy in general. This is one of the unspoken black heroes of ancient Egypt, representing a from prehistoric, ancient to modern kingdom. By the way, of the Egyptians who lived at the time, he is only one who could understand the Meroitic languages. There was so many other people. The difference is they wrote maybe one or two sentences contributing in someone else's book. So you can't really give a long explanation of what they did and how they did it. But they every now and then they talk about the kingdom of Kush, and they talk about how the kingdom of Kush literally was the last holder of ancient Egyptian knowledge. And not only was it, it probably still is today, like record wise, like in the religion, in the religion of these people, it's probably still cemented. You can't really worship a religion for thousands and thousands of years, and now the religion has nothing to do with the ancient Egyptian religion at all, when it was the main religion in your country. That's why it's interesting, and that's going to be my next video. It's interesting to look at the gods still worshipped in Sudan in the native religions. And also, we have to separate the different native religions because, of course, the Dinka are going to represent something slightly different. But because the ancient Egyptians and the Sudanese, and this is this is the part where it confuses me, because the ancient Egyptians and the Sudanese moved, but let's say it's just the Sudanese, they moved at one time of their history into the lower parts of Africa. So they moved into Tanzania, Congo, Kenya, those areas, and they fused with the religions. It means that some Bantu religions hold ancient Egyptian ritual. This is one of the most important scripts written down. And as you can see here, ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics appears everywhere, or ancient Egyptian writing appears everywhere. You see that it's being repurposed. So what you're looking at here is an experiment in alchemy. And you can see a hand there, you can see a bird there, you can see an ankh there. And again, there is some speculation that these people created a secret code between alchemists that only alchemists could understand, that they were using ancient Egyptian writing. Now, there is a connection between Sudan, Egypt, and the Arabic areas. What is that? Afro-Asiatic languages. Remember that. Afro-Asiatic languages. In Saudi Arabia and Yemen, there is the language that is the most closest today to ancient Egyptian in a way, in one way. And then there's Somali, which is close in a different way. And then you have the other languages that are close in a different way. But the reason why it's important that the Saudi Arabian language is similar in a certain way is that only later do we see the language starting to adopt the religious words that would be used. But let's take an example of a word like Nun, for example. So Zulnun himself, the word Nun in Zulnun means whale. Remember the Nun in ancient Egyptian religion, the Nun is the waters that first sprang out the gods. Think about that connection there. The guy's called Whale. Let's be honest, it's not a flattering name in any way, shape, or form. Nothing in Islam or really in Christianity or anything would make you call your child that. But in ancient Egyptian, that's different. Now, what if the word noon didn't refer to a whale? And that, yeah, sure, the word can be whale, but actually it was referring to the noon in ancient Egyptian writing. I don't want to completely blow your mind here, so we'll stop after I say this. Even the Coptics and all these other people. Oh yeah, that was one of the languages that Zulnun al-Misri spoke, Coptic. I don't want to completely blow your mind, so even the Coptics of, you know, Egypt, let's not call it ancient Egypt, it's like a semi-modern 600 AD to about till today, or till about 1400 AD, they continued the study of the ancient Egyptian language, the ancient Egyptian history, and the ancient Egyptian tradition. I've shown you Isaac Newton, and a lot of what Isaac Newton said about the history of the world, a lot of it comes from the ancient Greeks. Like I can see it like copy for copy. His opinions on the Ethiopians, his opinions on the Assyrians, his opinions on the Arabians. They're all sort of a copy by copy, like a photocopy of their opinions. But I can also see some Islamic influence in his work. The way that the Muslims repainted the history of Egypt. I can see that in his work, he clearly picked up a lot of their traditions. He must have read their books. Like, share, subscribe, and ask yourself this question. If the Nubians could keep the ancient Egyptian alive, ancient Egyptian religion, language, and everything else alive, why can't we?